It's decision day in America.
We've all been through a really rough year, and we all want to.
All right, welcome to election night here 2020.
We are here. We're on air right now. This is a special election edition at 6 o'clock, and we are excited to be here right now. Watch this.
It's decision day in America.
We've all been through a really rough year, and we all want to get through to the other side of this together, and so it's important to come out and vote.
This is our duty as U.S. citizens to get out and vote.
Like much of 2020, this will not be your usual election season. Voters are still at the polls, but millions of ballots were cast in advance.
We just broke the previous record for our presidential turnout in 2016.
In an unprecedented presidential election, Trump, Biden, and the race to the finish.
This election is a choice between the American dream and a socialist nightmare.
This election is the most important one you've ever voted in, whether it's your first or 10th.
We're tracking the path to victory, the states that could swing it, and the local races you'll decide on. Our special election 2020 coverage begins right now.
It is 2020, and the second time is a charm. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ben Goldman, and this is Election 2020.
And I'm Jen Bernstein. It's an election year like no other. We are in the midst of a pandemic, and voting, of course, as we know, is a little bit different this year.
But the turnout's been amazing. Millions of ballots have already been cast, but the polls are still open for about 2 more hours here in Connecticut. Here's what lines look like right now in the city of Bridgeport. State leaders expecting high voter turnout this election. COVID-19 and the cold not keeping people away on this election day. Here's what they look like this morning. Fox 61's Angelo Bavaro tweeting out this time-lapse video just after 6:30 this morning from Milford, about 30 minutes after the polls opened. A very long line of voters outside of Harbor Middle School. He says one man told him he's never seen so many voters turn out so early in the morning.
In New Fairfield, you can see voters were in line as the sun came up this morning in that community. Many people wearing masks and waiting to perform their civic duties here. And this is from Wolcott about 10 minutes before those polls open. Fox 61's Lisette Nunez tweeting out this time lapse from outside Tyrell Middle School.
And this tweet from Brian Foley from the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection right at 6 a.m. He says, this is the Talon polls. Plenty of people there ready to vote as well.
Across the country, similar scenes from North Carolina to Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, and Texas. Long lines of voters across the nation.
Right now, we're also awaiting a live press conference from Secretary of the State Denise Merrill. That's set to start any minute. It looks like she's speaking. We want to take you there live.
The most recent numbers that we just finished collecting, while inexact, it looks like it's at this point just under 70% turnout. This is before 6 o'clock. It's the highest number I can ever remember, but maybe there were others. Someone, I think it was Paul, just told me it was in 1992 we had a higher turnout, 85% or something. 83.9. Yeah, there you go. So, that is the story of the day. The lines are building again. So, because as people get off work or on their way home, they are stopping to vote. And so it's continuing, and it will be a high turnout. We've had very few problems during the day. We had a couple of places where ballots were mixed up, but we're busy taking care of that. And right now, people are still counting, so the absentee ballot figure could go higher. We're counting as of last night. There were about 636,000 registered on the online system, but many more probably came in today. So at the end of the day, it looks like people chose both. They both came in person and they came with absentee ballots. And when you add it all up, people are very interested in voting this year. So I don't know what else to remind people of, except, yes, you can still, as of this hour, still put your absentee ballot in the ballot boxes right up till 8 o'clock. None of the ones that came in today will be counted until after 8 o'clock so that we can cross-check the lists. And other than that, yes, you can still register and vote using Election Day registration right up until 8 o'clock. And my message to voters is stay in line. If you're in line, stay there, because you will be allowed to vote if you're in line by 8 o'clock. I'm hoping those lines don't build too much because I hate to see that. At least it's a little warmer tonight than it was this morning. But it still is certainly a great day for Connecticut's election.
Can you talk about, are there any problems at Grace Lutheran Church in Hartford? Was there enough staff? I mean, the lines there seem to be like 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and I don't know if we're seeing lines at any other locations like that.
There were reports of some other places that had maybe 2-hour lines, and I heard that was true in Asylum Hill as well. But I don't know. You know, Grace Lutheran Church, it's right near my neighborhood, and I know parking is an issue. It's difficult, and I did see long lines there. But, you know, of course, it looks longer because people are standing 6 feet apart. But if you're waiting in line 2 hours, that is a long line.
Do you think that Hartford prepared enough, or that Hartford had enough staff or enough help or volunteers?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hesitate to say that because the preparation downtown was amazing for the Election Day registration booths, and I was there yesterday, and they had, you know, lines of people still going in to get absentee ballots. So this was a hard one to call for election officials. We had to prepare for both everybody coming in person and everybody voting absentee ballot. And it would appear that many more people decided to come in at the last minute in person. So it's hard to say. I don't know how many tables they had set up there. And like I say, it was a hard one to call.
Were there any like tabulator snafus or anything like that just across the state? Or there? I always hear about them breaking down.
Yeah, I heard about one here and there, but nothing like what happened in 2018 with the wet ballots that kept jamming the machines. I did hear about that somewhere where somebody was giving out too much hand sanitizer or something, and it was getting on the ballots and jamming the machine. But these are all kind of anecdotes, you know, urban myth probably. But we did hear about some of that. But I think remarkably little considering the voter turnout today. Amazing.
What about election day registration? I realize clerks and other folks are probably real busy just getting through the election, but have you heard any numbers on election day registration?
Not really. I have heard there are some people doing it, using election day registration, and they were certainly prepared for it in the cities. I know that because we worked with them, you know, a couple years ago. New Haven had a big problem. But I think the fact that students are not so much in school now, and a lot of them seem to have voted in their hometowns, that may have changed the dynamic. We really haven't heard about a big number of election day registrations.
Have you any update on the situation in London, and have there been examples of the incorrect ballots being distributed to voters?
That's the only one that seems large enough to even notice. I heard kind of a rumor about Killingly, but that we're still looking at that. I'm not sure that actually was true.
With the crush of the absentee ballots, what do you think that will do to, how long do you think it will take to get final results?
You know, final results in absolutely every race. I mean, of course, you know that we don't certify an election, which are really the final results for weeks. But as far as initial unofficial results will be on our website, you know, on a rolling basis. I suspect most of our towns will be done by midnight. And then, you know, the cities and the larger suburb towns will probably take a longer time, especially those like West Hartford that have an enormous number of absentee ballots. I think they had something like 18,000. That's a big number.
Would you say by tomorrow night, maybe?
I'm hopeful that by tomorrow night we'll know most of them. The only real question will be those kind of close races where it makes a big difference, and there will be some of those.
So you don't think that any of the towns will count the absentee ballots that went into the absentee ballot box today?
Well, they can't count them until after 8 o'clock.
Right, they can't count them until after 8 o'clock.
Right. Some of them were saying that if they had so much to do tonight, they were going to wait until the morning to do that count. And that is okay. But I would hope that if they're not completely swamped, that they would count those starting at 8 o'clock as well.
Have you heard anything about rejection rates of absentee ballots?
I have heard that it's probably pretty much on track as always, but you know, we won't know really until we start counting them all. But you know, we never really keep track of those things. There is no curing of absentee ballots in Connecticut. No statute supports that. So what we have to do is just report the number to the federal government. And we've always been very low on that number, under 1%, sometimes under half of 1%. So we'll see.
It may take a while before it comes to fruition in terms of being able to vote early in Connecticut or have mail-in voting or use absentee voting. But, based on what you're seeing in this election today, do you think the opposition to that is going to be able to be overcome in the next legislative session?
I would hope so. At least certainly the part about early voting. I mean, you can see tonight, I was just watching the news in Georgia and some of these other places that have early voting, and there are no lines at the polls. Why? Because they all voted early. So, I mean, although you saw long lines for early voting in some places, that shows you how hard it is to calculate when people are going to vote. Still, it would take enormous pressure off Election Day. And of course, I think now the genie's out of the bottle on absentee voting. People really want these options. So I would think there'd be less opposition.
And as you pointed out several times, that people seem to like to vote in person here in Connecticut. Do you
Yes.
think early voting would that be even more of an appeal?
Yeah, that's right. That's the way they do it in places like Massachusetts. It's basically early in-person absentee balloting, if you will. You come in person, but you come on, let's say, 3 or 4 other days, and you file what's effectively an absentee ballot, much like people are doing right now. So I'm all for it. I think we need to let our citizens have the same options that many other states do. I think we're now in a very small number of states that don't have either of those options. So I think we're ready for it. I hope so.
And could early voting be done without a constitutional amendment? Or
no, but we did pass it last session. We just need to pass it through another legislature, and then it goes on the ballot. Yeah, so whatever we do is going to take some time now, unless we can get a 75% vote in the General Assembly, both houses. And I'm hopeful that can happen now. That would be especially true of no-fault absentee balloting, so-called. We would definitely have to take that language out of the state constitution. But we would just put it in statute instead, which is what we've been recommending for about 10 years, because it leaves us no flexibility when it comes to something like this pandemic. That's the problem.
So do you think the chance of early voting is probably easier than, or no excuse, now that we know what no excuse absentee ballot looks like?
Right.
Is that an easier lift?
Well, early voting is one step closer. It was already passed last session, not with enough votes that it doesn't have to go back to the legislature again and then on the ballot. But anything would have to go on the ballot. And everybody in the state is going to get to vote on whether they want these options or not. And that's the beauty of it. I mean, I can't imagine why anybody would oppose letting people decide, and that's what we should do.
One more question on turnout. You
Yes.
said as of now, it was just under 70%.
Yes.
What's the forecast?
Well, people are always asking me that, and I mean, I have to say, I'm pretty confident we'll probably be certainly over 75%, which is the usual number for a presidential. I'm thinking it goes to maybe 80%, maybe even more. And that's what people are reporting in other states as well. My colleague in Colorado just reported that, I think it was 2 hours ago, 80% of the voters had voted in Colorado. Now, of course, they have mail-in voting as well as in person on Election Day, but still, that's 2 o'clock in Colorado, and that's a big number.
And what's our percentage of voters who are cast votes now?
How many have cast votes? Oh, you mean absentee ballots?
No, just...
Oh, in general. That's the number that's the percentage. I don't know what the actual number is.
That's fine.
Do we know? I don't know. It's a pretty vague number because we call all the towns and ask them how many of you have voted by now. And some towns we can't even reach, so it's an extrapolation at best. Yeah, sure. All right. Well, Election Day is going great, and anybody who still hasn't voted, there's still time. 8 o'clock, cutoff date. And if you're in line, stay in line. You will get to vote. If you're in line by 8 o'clock, you get to vote. All right, thanks everyone.
What's your next availability? Or are you done tonight?
I don't think we won't do another one tonight.
That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Important information from the Secretary of the State, Denise Merrill, on the high turnout that we are seeing across Connecticut. We're actually going to be talking with her one-on-one coming up at 6:30. And just in another minute or two, we're going to be talking with Governor Ned Lamont ahead.
It's election night here, election 2020. We've got team coverage, and that continues right after this. Stick with us.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear Jen.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Jen.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So we're going to introduce you all, and then I'm going to start, but I'm going to start with Dan Koski. I'm going to ask Dan Koski to kind of set the scene with this election cycle.
Okay.
And then Ben will also go to
I'll probably go to
the
Rob
treasurer.
Kane.
Or yeah, will Rob Kane and Sean Wooden be able to talk?
We've got 50 seconds.
Okay. So you're going to go to Rob Kane and then we'll go to Sean Wooden. Okay. Cool.
We're going right.
Thanks for staying with us for this special election night coverage that we are doing. I want to bring in some very special guests that we have joining us. We have Treasurer Sean Wooden, who is a Democrat. We have Rob Kane, the state's Republican auditor, former state senator, joining us. And we have John Dankosky. He is the host of the Steady Habits podcast, which is with the Connecticut Mirror. We are so glad that you three are joining us tonight.
Guys.
Thank you.
Great to be with you.
Thanks for having us.
I want to start with John. This has been an emotional election cycle. It's been volatile at times. It's been nasty a lot of the times. What's the environment out there and why?
Well, the why really started back in 2016. I think a lot of people were taken by surprise when Donald Trump won. And a lot of Democrats, liberals, haven't been able to get over that. An awful lot of people in America have been very stressed out over the course of the last 4 years. And you've probably felt it, Jen. All of you in studio have felt it. People are stressed. They're worried. They're thinking that this very tense time isn't going to end tonight. But one thing I will just tell you quickly, after hearing from Denise Merrill today, hearing that there weren't really any disruptions at the polls, and seeing with my own eyes that people were kind of calmly standing in very long lines going out to vote, it made me feel somehow a little less stressed and a little less tense. And I hope that a lot of people feel that way today after what's been a very, as you say, emotional last 4 years and certainly last few months.
I want to bring in Rob Kane. You know, Rob, you're a former state senator yourself. want to talk about some of the leadership changes here on a state level. You know, everyone's focused on the presidential election tonight, but there are these state races and some major leadership changes. What races are you watching closely?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ben. There are very many important races in the state legislature. As you know, in 2016 in the Senate, we were able to come to 18-18 tie, and in the House within 4 or 5 seats, a whisper of majority. In 18, in the midterm election, we lost a lot of those gains. So I'm looking to see that we can rebuild that base back up. I think Greenwich is a good seat. Ryan Fazio, state Senate candidate, he should be able to pick up that seat back. I think we have many House seats that are down in Fairfield County way that went blue that are going to come back to red. And certainly Eastern Connecticut has gone red since 2016, so I'm looking forward to more gains there.
Treasurer Wooden, I want to bring you in. Do you think that blue wave that we saw in 2018, which allowed Democrats to regain the Senate and get more seats in the House, is that going to continue today?
I think it is, based on the local issues within our state, based on the national climate and having Donald Trump at the top of the ticket. I think we're going to see a continuation of that blue wave. With respect to the state Senate, will definitely Democrats pick up seats. I think a couple of races to really watch are the Rick Lopes out in New Britain and Berlin, Connecticut. I think that might be a Democratic pickup. Also, the race George Cabrera in the Valley area, that might be another Democratic pickup. But I don't expect gains on that side. In the House, I think there'll be a net increase in the margin of Democrats there. So definitely there is a continuation and both a combination of Democrats speaking to the bread and butter issues of the electorate in Connecticut, as well as the big weight of President Donald Trump and how out of touch he is with Connecticut and the inability of Connecticut Republicans to reject the politics of Donald Trump.
All right, Treasurer Sean Wooden, we thank you all. We're going to continue to come back to you for more commentary. A lot at stake here in Connecticut. We have the presidential race. We have our congressional races on the ballot, as well as we were just talking about our local legislature.
Getting to that point, we want to go directly to the city of Bridgeport. It's that now post-work rush for voters. We saw a lot of long lines this morning. Secretary Merrill says that's continuing so far with a lot of turnout, no major issues so far.
Which is fantastic to hear. That is in part due to a state-appointed monitor to ensure that every vote is counted properly in Bridgeport. For more, we want to go to Dave Puglisi, who is live in the city for us. Dave, how's it looking?
Ben and Jen, I'm at Blackham Middle School in Bridgeport, where the line has been pretty consistent since we got here at 4 o'clock this afternoon. It's still wrapped around the building. You can see a number of people here braving the cold to be able to cast their vote and voice their opinion through a ballot. Now, things have been running smoothly here today, and that's in large part to that monitor that was appointed by the state. That monitor was Max Medina. He was appointed by the Secretary of State's office to monitor polling here in Bridgeport. The state felt that there was a need for one after having issues in the past with elections. They either haven't run smoothly or some have challenged the validity of the results. This year, Medina has been in touch with all 20 polling locations and their staff multiple times before the elections to make sure that they are all staffed up. He has been at every single polling site today, and so far only a couple minor issues were reported. All have been fixed, and everyone's vote has been counted.
Bridgeporters can feel comfortable knowing that today this election is completely on the up and up, and that they should be proud of the numbers that they are showing and coming out. And that credit doesn't belong to me. It belongs to Bridgeporters who are voting, and it belongs to the Bridgeport professional elected officials in the town clerk office and the registrar of voters office that are working very hard to deliver Bridgeport a nice, clean, fair election.
Medina said coming in today that they already had 13,000 absentee ballots, and they expect hundreds more throughout the day today. And those ballots won't be started to be counted until after all in-person polling results have been counted here in Bridgeport. And that means, he says, that those absentee ballots might not be started to be counted until close to midnight tonight. In Bridgeport, Dave Puglisi, Fox 61 News.
All right, Dave, thank you so much. Keep us updated. We want to talk about our congressional races right now. The 3rd Congressional District pits incumbent Rosa DeLauro against Margaret Stryker. She's a Republican, as well as Justin Paglini.
Fox 61's Tony Terzi joining us live. Tony, the district hasn't voted Democrat since 1982. What can you tell us? How are things looking there tonight?
Yeah, it's true. Since 1992, we have Rosa DeLauro here in the 3rd Congressional District as the representative that's headed back and forth between D.C. and Connecticut. But she does have a challenger, as Jen said. It's Margaret Stryker, the Republican, who is her primary challenger. Stryker, who voted in her home city of Milford this morning, has received endorsements from quite a few police unions, including the New Haven Police Union and the Connecticut Fraternal Order of Police.
To have received the endorsement of so many police unions throughout the state has been absolutely spectacular. It wasn't something I had sought out, but at the same time, to have it, it's really impactful to me.
I have the support, I know, of rank and file police officers all over the district. I'm, excited about that. I have the greatest admiration, for the work that they do.
Now, DeLauro is the co-sponsor of the Justice in Policing Act, which is a House bill that pledges to hold law enforcement accountable for misconduct, to improve transparency through data collection, and to reform police and training and policies. I neglected to say, as the folks from Hartford, Ben and Jen, tossed to me, we're live here at Wilbur Cross High School, where voting has been steady, very good, almost 1,500 in-person voters here at the high school. There are about 3,100 in the district. They say they expect that there's probably about 1,200 absentee ballots, and they say it's at least as good a turnout, if not better, than 2016. Again, we're live in New Haven at Wilbur Cross, where Mayor Justin Elicker voted this morning. I'm Tony Terzi, Fox 61 News.
And we saw that picture with him voting with his kids earlier this morning. Tony, thank you very much. Our team coverage continues tonight, watching the race for Connecticut's 5th Congressional District.
That race pits Jahana Hayes. She is being challenged by David X. Sullivan, who's a Republican, as well as Bruce Walczak. Fox 61's Matt Karen joining us live with a closer look at that heated matchup. Matt.
Well, guys, you just heard Secretary of the State Denise Merrill talk about 65% voter turnout across the state. Here in Cheshire, just checked in with the Registrar of Voters office. They're about 70%, and again, we still have an hour and a half left to vote. A lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm translating here into voter turnout. The lay of the land here in the 5th Congressional District is diverse. There are 41 communities in the 5th District encompassing 3 different counties of the state of Connecticut. Democrat Jahana Hayes is 47 years old. She's the incumbent. She's from Wolcott. She's a former National Teacher of the Year in Waterbury. She's been fighting for education issues ever since she got into office. She actually sits on the Education Committee in Congress. Hayes, though, does not believe that schools should be open during COVID. I've spoken with her about this before. In fact, Jahana Hayes actually got COVID herself, and she's been very critical of the president's response, and she chronicled and journaled her experience with the disease. David Sullivan, her Republican challenger, meanwhile, well, he does believe that schools should be open right now. He's a teacher himself at the Yale Law School and Western Connecticut State University. He's a former federal prosecutor of 30 years, and he's received the endorsement of more than a dozen police departments across the 5th District. Fox 61 caught up with Jahana Hayes as she voted this morning, and I just talked to David Sullivan moments ago, and I asked them, what's their confidence level?
I feel good. I was worried that we wouldn't be able to capture the same energy and momentum because of the pandemic, but volunteers have showed up. We've raised the money. We've figured out ways to campaign differently, so I feel really good.
When you do this for 16 months, Matt, you may lose some objectivity, but I have to tell you, the 41 towns and the people in those towns have been marvelous to me. Republicans, unaffiliated voters, Democrats, they've all been marvelous. We've had great conversations. They've been civil conversations for the most part.
Jahana Hayes supports Medicare for All. She said that. She supports the Green New Deal and gun control. Sullivan, meanwhile, supports gun rights, police reform, and health care reform. Both candidates did vote in person today, and voting will continue. You have about an hour and a half left. As long as you are in line by 8 o'clock tonight, your vote will get counted. We're hoping to speak with both of these candidates as the votes get counted a little later tonight. For now, we're live in Cheshire. Matt Karen, Fox 61 News.
The 5th Congressional District has gone Republican. It's gone Democrat before, so we will have to see about that one. Our team has you covered on every angle of this election.
Aisha Bowe joining us live in studio with our Fox 61 big board tonight, showing you some of the technology that we here at Fox 61 have at our fingertips this election here in 2020 to keep you informed. Aisha.
Jen and Ben, good evening to both of you. Right now, the board, of course, quiet as we are waiting for some of those initial results to start coming in once polls start closing. But I want to give you a sneak peek of what we are dealing with here tonight. Of course, we are watching the presidential election, mostly Joe Biden, Trump, and then we also have 3 more candidates that are on here, all 0% right now as we're waiting for some of those results to come in. Some states to watch tonight: Florida, where there are 29 electoral votes that are up for grabs. We're also watching Georgia with 16 up for grabs, just to give you a sneak peek here of some of the things that we will hopefully be able to show you tonight. I also want to show you some other tabs that we are working with here on the board. I want to get you a look at the U.S. House District 3, where, of course, we'll be watching these numbers as they come in county by county for you and break down some of those results. Now, Connecticut also, we have those 5 congressional races where we'll be able to give you a look at those from District 1 to District 2, 3, and so forth. And before I want to move on here, I want to show you another tab that we are working with you tonight. Let's click that right there. So this right here shows you the Senate ballot of power right now, as of right now. So Republicans, of course, have the majority in the U.S. Senate with 53 seats, Democrats with 47 right now. So today we will be able to watch if there's any movement between these two sides here. Democrats, of course, will need 3 seats for that to change. And some races to watch. In Maine, Susan Collins, she is up for re-election in a blue state. She, of course, is a Republican Senate, and Republicans also are running for re-election in about 12 states tonight. So a lot to keep an eye on for you this evening, and we will, of course, be bringing you those results as soon as we get them. Last but not least, we are also watching the Twitter feed of the different tabs here for you, including the Secretary of State, CTGOP, as well as, of course, President Donald Trump and Vice President Joe Biden. So a lot to get to here tonight. Of course, those polls are starting to close here in about a half an hour in states like Georgia. So, of course, as soon as these results start coming in, we will be sure to bring it to you. Ben and Jen, back to you.
All right, Aisha, thank you. Keep us updated. Our election coverage is going to continue next, but as we head to break, we wanted to share a photo with you.
Yeah, Mary sending in this picture of her son, Kyle, who's disabled. She says that this is a picture of him voting for the very first time ever in Naugatuck. We love to see it. Mary, thanks for sharing that photo with us. And as we go to break, here's some live pictures from around the state. This second wave of after-hours voting. We saw long lines this morning, and they're back here this evening. Live pictures in Bridgeport. Our team coverage continues right after this.
Can you hear us, Denise?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great.
Yes.
It's going to be Jen and Ben this time.
Hi, Secretary Merrill.
Hi. We're back.
We're back. Okay, so we just listened
We're
to
back.
yes, we just listened to your update, which is great. So we'll just have a few questions for you.
All right.
Ben, you want to start this one?
Yeah. Welcome back here on election night. Elections are always a big deal for news stations, but even a bigger deal if you're the Secretary of the State. Joining us live, Secretary Denise Merrill. Good to be with you.
Nice to see you again.
So we just heard your update a short while ago. We hear the words high turnout, which is always really great with participation here in the state, but what are the preliminary numbers saying right now?
Well, as of about 2 hours ago, it was just shy of 70% of all registered voters had voted.
That is good news. But we know
That's a big number.
It is a big number.
That's a big number. Yeah.
Talk about the absentee ballots for a second. Your office had said more than 600,000 absentee ballots were sent in here in Connecticut. That means that poll workers have to now go through all of these absentee ballots. What is the process? I just heard you saying before that you're hoping all the results will be known by at least tomorrow night. But are they having to go and rip individually those ballots and put them through the tabulators?
Yes, that's exactly right. That's why we allowed them, if they wished to, they could have undone the outer envelope before Election Day. And about 40 towns decided to do it. So they do. They have to open the outer envelope, then note down the name and the signature of the person who voted. Then after that, they're separated and so that your ballot remains anonymous. Then they open the inner envelope, take it off, and then unfold the ballot and put it through a tabulator. And so, you know, it's a laborious process, and 636,000 so far. And that is not all of them, because more would have come in today in the ballot boxes.
You know, we want to talk about Election Day registration. We just showed a picture before the break of Bridgeport. Those long lines are now growing like we saw this morning for after work hours, people coming to vote. If you want to register to vote, if you're in line right now and you are registered, you can stay in line as we look live at what those lines look like around the state. But what if you want to register to vote? You have to be done with that by 8 p.m. Is that right? Can you just explain that?
No, you don't. Actually, we passed a new law this year that says, just like everyone else, if you are in line by 8 o'clock, even if you have not registered yet, you will be allowed to vote. That's because we had a big problem in 2018 where literally hundreds of people lined up before 8 o'clock, but they weren't allowed to vote because they weren't registered by 8 o'clock. We did change that law, so I guess my message is for everyone, if you're in line to do either Election Day registration or at the polling place, stay in line, you will be allowed to vote.
That's good news. All right, Secretary of the State Denise Merrill, we appreciate your time. We're going to be talking with you a little bit later as well, but we'll let you get back to work.
Great, thanks so much.
All right, our team coverage continues right after this.
Governor, can you hear me? It's Jen Bernstein.
Governor, hi.
Hey, Jen, Ben, how are you guys?
Good, how are you?
We got it to work.
Yay. I know, I heard some tech problems. It's not fun. Thanks for staying with us on this special election edition here at Fox 61. I want to bring in Governor Ned Lamont, who is joining us now as our next guest. Governor, you can hear us okay?
I can hear you fine. Good evening, Jen.
Appreciate you being here. So we're going to talk about our local races here in Connecticut, but first I want to talk about the presidential race and what's at stake here. Your administration has had to work with the Trump administration on a number of things, including the pandemic that we've been dealing with here. What do you think is at stake in this election moving forward?
Oh, I think the character of the nation. Look, often at this stage of a campaign, maybe the two candidates start to blur. But in this case, there's a stark difference between what Donald Trump's America looks like and what it could be under Joe Biden. And I think that's why, Jen, you have one of the largest turnouts in the history of the state. I think you're going to find that across the country as well. I was just looking at the numbers, interested to see that Plainfield has over 95% of the people have already voted. Less than 100 can turn out and get to 100%. Who knows?
You know, Governor, a lot of leadership changes in the Republican Party here in the state of Connecticut, with Themis Claridis leaving, Len Fasano. What type of legislature do you expect to be working with? What kind of outcome do you think is going to happen here when it comes to these local state races tonight?
I think it'll be a referendum on the job we've done over the last couple of years here in this state. When it comes to balancing the budget, when it comes to dealing with COVID and other big issues that have confronted us. But look, I want people in the legislature who are ready to solve problems and not create issues, not just try and get a political issue. And I'm looking forward to some of the new leadership that's going to be there.
The police accountability bill that you signed into law has had repercussions on a lot of these races. A lot of the police unions backing the Republican candidate, considering the police accountability bill was largely along Democratic Party lines here. Any regrets on that bill?
Look, I think it's important that people be held accountable, and the police accountability bill is one way to do that. But it also demonstrates real respect for our police. And I got to tell you, we just swore in a class of state police. We had more applicants to that class, thousands than we've ever had before. We had our most diverse class in terms of women and people of color. And I'm doing everything I can to be a champion for the state police and the amazing work they're doing around the state.
You know, Governor, you've run for office so many times. You finally get elected, and for the past 8 or 9 months that you've been governor of this state, you've been dealing with this crisis, this pandemic, the last thing that you expected to probably deal with when you were campaigning and hoping to lead this state. But now that we're 8 or 9 months in the weeds of it, and, you know, a lot of people are watching us who might be laid off, might be looking for some type of answer. We see all of this turnout of people unifying in our state, and whoever they're voting for, there's some type of unification amid this pandemic. What's your message to them? It's got to be somewhat encouraging for you, the leader of a state with now almost 80% of people voting. There's got to be some message of unification, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Look, we got hit by this pandemic. Connecticut really rallied, got together as one. We're in this together. People wearing the mask. That's how we brought our infection rate down to some of the lowest in the country for a long time. I hate to say it, but it is ticking up in this state as well as it is around the country. But despite that cloud that could be hanging over, people went out and voted. Thankfully, we had the absentee ballots, so those who are older at risk could vote without having to line up at the ballot box. And I think people are doing it safely. I think people are keeping the distance. And if you can vote safely. I think that's a good day.
I want to make sure we get this in. We were looking on Joe Biden's website, and we see that you, as well as the First Lady here in Connecticut, Annie Lamont, have helped him raise over $100,000 in contributions. You've always been a Joe Biden fan. Have you talked to his camp today? And what do you plan if he does become president? Are you going to get pulled up?
Look, I am a Joe Biden fan, have been for some time. He fights for the middle class. I think he represents our best values. I think people know him. Obviously, he's got a lot of friends here in Connecticut. A lot of people turned out for him. A lot of people raised money. And I think he's going to be a good friend for Connecticut as well as we wade our way through what I hope is the final innings of this pandemic and get our state back on its feet with support to get people back at work.
Governor, I was going to push you on health insurance tonight, but we ran out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining us here on this election night. We always appreciate it.
Thank you, Governor.
Ben, Jen, thank you, guys.
All right, we are going to talk with our panel of experts coming up right after this break. Stay with us. You want to do AJ?
Yeah.
Start.
Pastor AJ, can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Yeah, we can definitely hear you. I didn't know we were on a panel of experts tonight. That is just such a high big time.
Easy, AJ.
Don't do that.
Welcome back. Our special coverage of election 2020 continues tonight. You know, we see these races all around the state, and we want to look at the capital city of Hartford and bring in one of the city community leaders, Pastor A.J. Johnson, along with his wife. Great to be with both of you.
Hello.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Wonderful. AJ dressed to the nines as always. You know, you guys really, both of you, Melinda and AJ, have your pulse on the capital city of Hartford and how voters are feeling. We've seen high turnout. Mayor Bronin said plenty of people came out and voted. What have you been hearing from people in the Hartford community?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's not what we've been hearing, it's what we've been seeing. Today, being at the poll over here in the 7th Assembly District in Hartford, we were greeted with a line of people that we've never seen before. And as we walked up to that line, I told everybody to smile, make some noise, because this is Obama-type like energy. And so what we're seeing is that people are energized to vote. And this is something that is great because in Hartford, in non-election years, you only get 7 to 10% of folks who come out to vote. So seeing this energy today was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I think more than ever we are seeing that people are not just showing up at the polls to make a choice between candidates, but they're making decisions about their life and their future. And that's why this day and this moment was so critical in our community.
What do you think is going to play out? What is going to play out rather over the next couple of days? I mean, we might not know who is even president when we go to bed tonight. What do you think that means for Hartford?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we know how Connecticut is. Connecticut is a blue state, so we know that this state is going to probably continue into that path. On the note of not knowing who the president is going to be, for a couple of weeks, I think that you know, I think that everybody should be calm. I think that everybody should be patient. We know that 270 is the electoral college vote that it needs, the numbers that need to get there. And so I think that everybody just needs to be patient and watch and just watch what happens. I think that we're going to win. I think it's going to be a blue wave like we expect. But I think everyone just needs to be patient and remain calm.
You know, AJ, racism has been a topic that we've talked a lot about. You and I spoke when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening in Hartford months back, still in the middle of this pandemic. What's your message to a voter in Hartford who hasn't gone and voted because they just hate how toxic this entire election season has been with the racial tensions back and forth and the rhetoric back and forth? What's your last minute? The polls are open for about an hour and 10 more minutes in Hartford and throughout the state. What's your message to voters who just have had enough and haven't gone out to vote?
Yeah, so I'm going to let my wife comment on that in just a moment, but I think that the message is voting is only one piece of what we are supposed to do. We need a plan for racism in this state. As I said, this state bleeds blue, but we're very conservative in a lot of different ways. Racism still shows its face in a lot of the suburban towns that we experience and go visit. It may not be blatantly like a police with a foot on or a knee on the neck, but it could be in education. Racism shows itself in welfare liens, in a ridiculous practice that only Connecticut and New York has. Racism shows itself, particularly when it comes to issues of clean slate. And a whole host of economic issues. So I'm gonna let Melinda take the rest of that.
Yeah, certainly. So for people of color that are making that decision today, saying that they need to step out and feeling the need to make action beyond the protest, voting is that first step. Voting is the opportunity, the responsibility, and the right of citizens to engage in our civics, our civic engagement. But it's just the first step, it's just the door. Beyond that, the same way that we create plans to go to the polls, we need to create plans to be involved year-round in our civic engagement, to hold powers accountable to what's right and what's serving to our community. So this is just a first step. And those that have gone the mile during a global pandemic to show their outrage over the summer in protests should do the equal due justice to show their outrage through their vote, and also to show their outreach and participating in civic engagement beyond this moment.
So you said it very clear, Ben. As you stated to the governor, I mean, he raised $100,000 for the Biden campaign, which is very admirable. But we have to focus on the people that's going to be here, because our politicians aren't guaranteed to be here. Like you said, folks, there's going to be a lot of transitions happening if the Democrats win. So we have to make sure that we have a plan for the folks who actually live here and want to continue to contribute to this great state and this great city.
It's going to be interesting what happens tonight, what happens tomorrow, in the coming weeks, and yes, even in the coming year, if there is a switch of the administration. Pastor A.J. Johnson, his wife Melinda, thank you both so much for coming and speaking with us this evening.
All right, thank you guys. Our special coverage of Election 2020 continues. Before we go to break, live pictures right now from Bridgeport as that line continues. Polls close in just over an hour here in Connecticut. We'll be right back.
Well, stay with us. We have plenty of election coverage ahead in the next hour.
Nonstop here. We'll be joined by a number of different guests, including House Republican leader Themis Claridis, the governor's chief of staff Paul Mounds, and our panel of experts. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us for our special coverage of election 2020. I'm Ben Goldman.
And I'm Jen Bernstein. We're in the final hours with polls set to close across the state at 8 p.m.
Yeah, here's what the lines look like right now in Bridgeport. We saw long lines this morning, and they are back with this after-work push at the polls. State leaders said that high voter turnout was there, higher than basically anyone expected. COVID-19 and this cold weather not exactly keeping people away on this Tuesday night.
As we said, we're following a number of races tonight. The first, the race for the White House. President Donald Trump wanting to carry his administration for another 4 years. His Democratic challenger, former Vice President Joe Biden, hoping to take the U.S. on a very different course.
There are a number of races we're watching here in Connecticut. Let's roll through them. The first congressional district, incumbent John Larson going up against Mary Fay and Tom McCormick.
In Connecticut's second congressional district, incumbent Joe Courtney is being challenged by Justin Anderson. Also on the ballot, Cassandra Martineau, and from the Green Party, Libertarian candidate Daniel Reel.
In the third congressional district, incumbent Rosa DeLauro facing Margaret Stryker and Justin Paglino.
Fourth congressional district, pitting incumbent Jim Himes up against Jonathan Riddle and Brian Merlin.
One more, Jen. The fifth congressional district, incumbent Johanna Hayes being challenged by David X. Sullivan and Bruce Walczak.
All right, so let's get to our panel of experts that we've been waiting to hear from. We're going to pull them up right now. We have the treasurer of the state of Connecticut, Sean Wooden, joining us, a Democrat. We also have Rob Kane. He is the state's Republican auditor, as well as a former state senator. And we have John Dankosky, who is the host of the podcast Steady Habits, which is a Connecticut Mirror podcast. We appreciate you all standing around and waiting to talk with us. So I want to talk with Treasurer Sean Wooden first, because people care about the money in their pockets. And we know that you know the financial markets. What do we expect if a Biden presidency, for example, hits by this week or next week or whenever we find out, versus a Trump presidency?
I think with the Trump presidency, you could expect to see more of the same, which is a lack of a federal response and leadership to COVID-19, which directly impacts our economy and the financial markets. We can see increased volatility. It's been volatile all year. And with Biden, you can expect to see, and you started to see it in the market opening today, the financial markets are starting to price in the higher certainty of a Biden victory, which means likely a greater stimulus or having a stimulus package. Democrats passed in the House a stimulus package in May that hasn't been acted upon yet. And that stimulus is necessary to the financial markets, but more importantly, because the financial markets in Wall Street is very different from the real economy in Main Street, you can expect to see infrastructure spending and a robust investment plan, with most economists saying that this is what our economy needs. And that's even taking into account the anticipation of higher corporate taxes as well as greater regulatory initiatives. But on a net basis, we can expect to see greater growth in our economy and stability in our financial markets.
I'm going to assume Rob Kane, Republican State Auditor, has a very different answer. Rob?
You know, Ben, I wore purple today to be bipartisan, but you're right. I will take a different view. We've seen under this president, before the pandemic, 3.5% unemployment, which is record low in 50 years, I think. We also saw the Dow Jones over 30,000 points. We see that gain coming back. We see the economy coming back by GDP by 33%. I think the reverse would happen if a Biden presidency. You see big oil companies, their stocks would unfortunately plummet. You've heard Vice President Biden talk about getting rid of fracking and natural gas and the squad putting forth the Green New Deal. All these things would hurt the economy. I think you've seen growth under this president. Listen, none of us like the tweets that he's putting out. We think I'd rather see him not put forth the personality that he does, but if you look at his economy, it was record growth. So I think it would be the reverse, but I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree.
Yeah, but I'd like to say, Ben and Jen, that don't just take it from the state's chief elected financial officer, take it from Goldman Sachs, who they've gone on record, and economists talking about the implications of a Biden presidency and a blue wave. And that wasn't in a partisan context, but just looking at the numbers. UBS, another very prominent firm. And so this is what the numbers are saying. In terms of record job growth, what we're talking about, we still have 12 million Americans unemployed as a result of the failure of Washington to sufficiently address COVID-19. And the recent job growth, we are still 30% under. And so this is nothing to celebrate. We are still in a period of economic crisis. Just look at Connecticut and the thousands of people out of work. Look at Connecticut and the number of small businesses that will never come back. But the economists, stimulus, the chairman of the Federal Reserve says we need a robust stimulus to sustain and to grow. And this is what the Biden administration will do.
I want to make sure that we bring in John Dankosky here, too. Trump has run on the economy. He was saying before COVID, everything was great. He even said today that success is what's going to bring people together here. What's your take when you're hearing this discussion going on? What topic is top of mind for voters when they're headed to the polls?
Well, I think a lot of voters, especially in Connecticut, and I've been talking to Connecticut voters for decades about pocketbook issues, and they really, really care about the money in their pocket. If you can make a case that it's going to be good for their personal economy or the state's economy, they want to often hear that argument. But, Jen, I think what this presidential race shows, and what the Donald Trump presidency has shown, is that it can't just be about your pocketbook. It's about how you handle a crisis. And it's if you have empathy for people who aren't necessarily like you. In this year, in this single year alone, we've seen seismic upheavals having to do with racial injustice, having to do with a global pandemic. these are things that are in some ways outside the bounds of the way most politicians think about the economy, but they're central to the economy. How do people feel about the place where they live? How do people feel about their health care and their ability to actually go to the doctor and not come out sicker? These are things that matter to people. And as I've been talking to people around the country over this election cycle, health care, one of the most important issues, especially for older and more moderate voters, and for more progressive and younger voters, the racial injustices that have come to light, not just in this past year, over the course of decades, are the things that they are really most focused on this particular year. And I will say their economy is important, but it's not the only thing that they care about.
Gentlemen, hang tight. We'll be coming back to you in just a moment. So many more topics to get to. But right now, we want to continue our team coverage. Some preliminary numbers are coming in from around the country. Aisha Bowe joining us live at the big board tonight. Aisha.
Hi, Aisha.
Ben and Jen, good evening. As promised in my last hit, as I mentioned, as we start seeing those polls begin to close, we will, of course, start to see some preliminary results. And I want to start with Indiana. Right now, the Associated Press as well as CNN are both calling Indiana for President Trump, where he is leading with 64%, which means that he will take those 11 electoral votes. So, of course, these early results starting to come in. Right now, I also want to show you the U.S. Senate race where Kentucky, we're also seeing some activity in Kentucky with that Senate race. Of course, right now, only 7% of those votes have been counted. And right now, they are calling it going in favor of blue. So we will start to see some more results come in here in just a moment. About 6 states had their polls close at 7 o'clock at the top of the hour, including battleground state Georgia, where we are expected to see some results here, hopefully soon, as well as in South Carolina. So when I give you an overboard of what we are working with tonight here, we'll be able to track for you some of these results as they come in for the U.S. presidential election. Again, so far, only results coming in from Indiana. We are also watching the local races here with the congressional districts here in Connecticut. Of course, polls here don't close until 8 o'clock. So hopefully once 8 o'clock hits, we'll start to see some activity on this tab here as well. When I give you a look on social media, we are also watching the social media platforms of the presidential candidates, starting here with Joe Biden. He tweeted this right here a couple of hours ago. We've also seen some activity from President Donald Trump within the last hour here, where he tweeted, "We are looking really good all over the country." So, of course, we'll keep our eye on these things here for you on the board. But, of course, back to you guys right now.
All right, Aisha, thank you very much. Our team coverage continues. Fox 61's Dave Puglisi joining us live in Bridgeport. Dave, what's the line looking like there?
Ben, the line here is still pretty significant. It's since 4 o'clock when we got here. The line has been wrapping around the building, and things have not changed. And now I'm told that over 2,100 people have voted at this location here in Bridgeport. And just in the 2 hours that we were here, that's 500 people who came out to vote. And they are braving the cold out here as they continue to try to be able to cast their opinion through a ballot. And polls close within an hour here, but remember, anybody in line does get the opportunity to vote, and I do expect that around 8 o'clock this line will still be around the side of the building and many more people that need to vote. And here in Bridgeport, they have started counting parts of the absentee ballots, but they say they won't really have a conclusion on who may have won over here until early in the morning. In Bridgeport, Dave Puglisi, Fox 61 News.
All right, Dave, thank you very much. Important to note to stay in that line even when 8 o'clock hits, because your vote will count. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.
Welcome back to our coverage of election 2020 tonight. I want to bring back our panel of experts we have. John Dankowski, I want to talk to you about something that I've been reading about, the secret Trump voter base. These people who might be saying publicly to their friends, to their family, to their coworkers that they're going to vote for Joe Biden because they might not agree with the tweets that the president sends out or his tone and rhetoric. But when they go behind the voting booth, all they're going to think about is their 401ks and their investment accounts. How are we accounting for that when we look at the polls that say Joe Biden might be ahead?
Well, I think one of the things that we learned from 2016 is the polls weren't necessarily correctly accounting for everybody in all the important ways. For instance, I don't think that we sampled education level quite the way that we should have back in 2016, and a lot of pollsters took that to heart and changed some methodology. So I think an awful lot of what we're hearing from people sounds like it's going to be a lot more hewing toward the truth this time around. But I totally hear what you're saying, Ben. There are going to be some people who say they, want to vote for Joe Biden, and they're going to go and vote for Donald Trump. But there's probably going to be some people who do the other thing, too. I think it's probably pretty clear, though, that there's a more stark difference in America right now between these two candidates, given everything else that's gone on. So I don't know that you're going to see quite as much of that hidden voter. And I certainly hope, no matter what the outcome, we see a little bit better polling this time around, a little bit better sense of what people were actually planning on doing.
So true. I want to bring in Rob Kane to this discussion. Connecticut Republicans are not in an easy position with President Trump. I was talking about this with John the other day. Some of them want to have Trump's lawn sign, but half of the other people would say, oh, we don't want to have Trump's lawn sign next to us. What does the Connecticut Republican need to do in an election like this?
Yeah, Jen, that's a great question. I think there are pockets, like I mentioned earlier, the eastern part of Connecticut has definitely gone red over the years. You look at my old district in the greater Waterbury area, it's a very conservative, moderate district. Even I would argue Reagan Democrats, so I think there's not much difference between a Democrat and a Republican in that area. Take a Joan Hartley, for example. But then I look at a Connecticut Republican like Andrew Rohrback, who was a great state senator, a wonderful, thoughtful guy who won every time when he ran for the state Senate, but had difficulty when he ran for Congress. Because even people in his own district wouldn't vote for him because of the national scene based on what was taking place with the Republicans down in D.C. So I think it's a conundrum, I really do. But I think people, as John Dankowski mentioned earlier, vote with their wallets. They want smaller taxes. They want smaller government. They want more freedoms. So I think you can be a strong Republican in Connecticut, providing you show those abilities that we offer.
Before we go to break, we're talking about money. Might as well bring in Treasurer Wooden. Treasurer Wooden, there are some voters out there who I've spoken to, who I know, who might be part of that secret Trump voter base, who really don't like his morals, don't love all of his policies, but they vote, they're single issue voters and they vote with their wallets and their pocketbooks. How much of Connecticut voters, even though might not be represented by the electoral votes that come with our state, all 7 of them, how many do you think are watching us now might be living in this state, those single issue voters who just vote with their wallets and might support Trump?
I think most Americans, the economy and their economics, their kitchen table is a top of mind issue. This year is unique, I think, in even elevating how important health care, COVID-19 response, access to affordable health care is really competing. And if you looked at the early exit polls late this afternoon, you will see that both of them are about, it was like 51-49% in terms of how important that issue was. And so I think in Connecticut, we absolutely have lots of voters who are concerned about taxes and their jobs and increasing wages. And I think, to those voters, I say, if you're an essential worker, and you want to be protected in terms of your job and your health care, then trust Governor Lamont, trust President Joe Biden, just based on the responses in terms of PPE and policy. If you're thinking about the economy and your jobs, we talked about this earlier, there is no question, never, certainly in my lifetime, has the contrast been starker in terms of who's going to care about and build an economy that's about working families in the middle class. And that's where most of Connecticut is. Who's going to address the racial inequities? I mean, that's the other pandemic we're in the midst of right now, is heightened by the George Floyd death, murder on national television. But who's going to address that? And sticking with the economy, McKinsey, a consultant, one of the world's premier consulting firms, has said that racial disparities, economic disparities, has cost our economy trillions, and projected if we can close that disparity gap within the next 10 years, we could grow our economy by 4 to 6 percentage points. And when you look at President Trump emboldened white supremacists, and when you look at Joe Biden and Kamala Harris talking about healing and moving this country together and addressing these issues, you can't see a starker contrast. And I will say, if you care about your pocketbook, if you care about higher wages and job security and retirement security, I think the choice is pretty clear cut.
I want to make sure we just touch base with Rob Kane right here, too. Your take on what the treasurer just said.
Well, of course, we have a different view. I look at the economic issues through taxes, through job growth, through the stock market, through unemployment figures. All of those things were actually doing pretty well under President Trump until the pandemic hit. And I think we're starting to rebound now. I think a lot of times people want it both ways. They say, oh, don't close the economy, but you closed the economy. Don't, do this, but do this. But, I mean, what do they want the federal government to do? I think they did the best they could under the circumstances. They stopped the travel early on. They put forth many of these mandates. They got the PPE out. They got the ventilators out. They've got the masks and all the equipment. I think what we've seen is we can come through this. America is a strong country. We can work in a bipartisan way. We can figure this out. And I think if we get back to that, and listen, again, I'm not crazy about the way the president tweets. I think it's pretty awful, a lot of things that he says. But I think overall, the economy was doing well until all this happened.
I think, I mean, I feel like we're looking at two Americas, and perhaps we are, because I see an America with a lot of people hurting. A lot of people were hurting pre-pandemic, and it's only gotten worse. And the pandemic has exacerbated the tension and the disparities between the top 1% and the middle class and working class generally. When we're talking about a response, I mean, Bob Woodward's reporting was phenomenal. We had a president who knew as early as February about how dangerous this COVID-19 virus would be, and he lied to the American people. When we look at governors across this country in the spring begging for greater support.
Treasurer Wooden, thank you. I'm so sorry to cut you off. We just have a little bit more that we need to get to. We're going to come back to our panel of experts in just a little bit, but we do have to take a quick break right now.
Stick with us as we look at live pictures from Londonderry, New Hampshire. Our coverage continues right after this.
Favorite thing they love to talk about is, that's me.
Paul, it's Ben and Jen. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Perfect. The ability to debate
okay,
up at
I
the
have our stuff
Capitol,
for him.
fight hard, and then go out for beer after.
100%. That's gone.
Thanks for staying with us. I want to bring in our next guest right now, Chief of Staff to Governor Ned Lamont, Paul Mounds. Paul, thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me, Jen.
All right, so you have had to work directly with President Trump's administration, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. What's that been like?
Well, I'll say honestly, and I know we had other members of the panel who spoke about this, the governors in this region had to work together. And one of the things that we were asking for and looking for was more direction, more leadership from the federal government, and the White House specifically, at the beginning of this crisis. But that's what led to Governor Lamont working with Governor Cuomo, Governor Murphy, as well as our other regional governors to have a collective response to address this coronavirus crisis.
Yeah, just one last question here, Paul, before we have to go. We do have to keep it short. We've looked at the distribution of PPE around the state and all of these different facilities and individual locations that needed masks, they got masks. What about vaccines? What's the plan for distributing a vaccine once one gets approved? A similar method or?
Yeah. I think one of the things you said that's most important is once one gets approved. And I think one of the things that we're going to do in the state of Connecticut is we're going to make sure that that vaccine has all the necessary approvals also locally. So that's why we have a coronavirus task force specifically on vaccines left with Deidre Gifford, our commissioner, as well as the head of St. Francis Hospital and Trinity Healthcare. One of the things that we're going to do is make sure we focus on our most vulnerable residents and making sure that we can keep our economy going. And that vulnerable residents means particularly in our nursing homes, our essential workers, and making sure that any distribution of the vaccine is done in a very equitable level.
We know that you had to roll back to a modified version of phase 2 this past week. What's your message to business owners? Because we're going into some tough few months coming up.
I think one of the main message we want to get across is that you have to take this time seriously. And I think a lot of business owners have done that. We've had some bad actors, unfortunately, and we've seen it all across the state. And I think one of the things that the governor has wanted to make sure to get across is that we all have to do this together. And so, yes, we have to roll back. We have seen our numbers rise, not only here in Connecticut, but in the region, but also nationally. We also taken very aggressive measures early on, which saw that great results. But we have to stay diligent in this manner, and that's what we're going to do, working with all related partners in the state of Connecticut.
Paul Mounds, Chief of Staff to Governor Ned Lamont. Paul, we appreciate your time. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, more to come tonight. Senator Chris Murphy joining us right after this. Stick around.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
7:45, sure. Let us know when we could talk to Senator Murphy. Senator Murphy, can you hear me?
Senator, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jen and Ben.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Where are you right now? Are you in Connecticut?
Yeah, I'm in Hartford.
Okay. Did you campaign today?
Yeah, I was around the state, on the shoreline, down Cheshire with Johanna. So I was all over.
Gotcha. Okay, Senator, have you heard any updates on any kind of like Russian interference or anything like that?
No, I don't think there was any news on
Any
that
issues? Okay.
from today. No major voting issues or that I heard about.
Okay, good.
Great.
Thanks for staying with us for this special election coverage. Just about a half an hour until polls close here in Connecticut. And I want to bring in our next guest, Senator Chris Murphy. Senator, thanks for being here. I know that you were going around today. You were just saying campaigning for Johanna Hayes, which is your old seat. What's it like being back in the state? And I also want to ask you about control in the Senate, because there's a possibility that it could flip and become a Democratic Senate. What do you think the chances are of that?
Well, I've been all over the state today. I mean, it's a strange election day. Obviously, we've had a lot of people vote ahead of time. There's not maybe as much commotion at the polling places because people understandably want to get in and out. Candidates aren't handing out materials, but sort of waving hello to voters as they stand in line. But it does look like it's pretty significant turnout in Connecticut, as it likely is all across the nation. As you mentioned, what's at stake tonight is, not only the presidency, but also control of the Senate. And my worry is that even if Joe Biden were to prevail tonight, if Mitch McConnell is still in charge of the Senate, it's kind of an immediate constitutional crisis. Mitch McConnell's not going to let Joe Biden get any of his cabinet or judicial picks confirmed. And so to have a functional government, I think right now we need to win both the presidency and the Senate. The Senate map is huge. I mean, we're competitive in states from Arizona to North Carolina to Alaska, and it may be a later night with respect to what we know about control of the Senate than it will be for the presidential race.
Obviously going to be interesting to watch some of those Senate races like John Cornyn in Texas, Lindsey Graham. I want to ask you, as one of the younger members of the U.S. Senate, the past 4 years of Donald Trump, how has that changed politics for you, for someone who hasn't been in Washington as long as some others who maybe will plan to be in Washington for a long time? How has politics changed for you going forward after President Trump?
Well, it's very nice that you consider me young. Young is kind of relative in the United States Senate. I'm young for the Senate. But listen, I mean, it's been a miserable last 4 years. Obviously, I love representing Connecticut. I'm privileged to have been given the chance to do it for a second term. But, we're playing defense all the time. we're just trying to hold together health care for people in Connecticut, trying to stop the president from ripping it away from folks in this state. We're trying to prevent the federal government from turning our police departments into immigration law enforcement agencies. We're trying to hold on to the Clean Air laws and the Endangered Species Act. So you feel like you've been just sort of holding on to the tiger's tail for the last 4 years. My hope is that if Joe Biden is president, one, we can get back to sort of a normal kind of discourse in the country where we treat each other decently, but we can also start playing offense. We can try to expand the number of people in Connecticut who have health care. We can try to actually be a global leader on climate change rather than always feeling like we're in this defensive crouch with this president. It's about restoring decency, and it's about finally taking on some of these problems rather than trying to just stop them from getting worse.
All right, Senator Chris Murphy, we appreciate your time. We're going to be talking with you tonight in our 10 o'clock show, so we will get an update from you then. Thank
Senator,
you.
we'll see you then. All right, polls close in just about 20 minutes here in Connecticut, just over it. Our coverage continues right after this.
Okay. Yes. Can you hear us? It's Jen and Ben.
Hey, hey. Senator Fasano, you got us?
Okay. Speaker Arasimowicz, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Oh, excellent.
Wonderful.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for doing this.
No problem. Appreciate the invite.
I think we're going to put you on with Senator Fasano. That's okay, right?
Of course. I always love to be with Len.
It better be okay, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Can we hear Senator Fasano? I see the speaker.
Am I good? Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, Wonderful. We see that you have Fox 61 on in the background.
Because that's all we watch.
Yeah. Cut it. Make it a promotions, please.
Good stuff. Welcome back to our Election 2020 coverage tonight. We have two special guests joining us, Senate Republican leader Len Fasano and House Speaker Joe Arasimowicz. Great to be with both of you. You both are leaving your current roles, not on the ballot tonight, separately but together. What's it like?
Why not let you go first?
It's very odd. You know, for me, I think election night still has that in it, you know, still excited about it, but I know and I can feel the end coming. So it's really sad. I'm going to miss it tremendously.
Yeah, I feel the same. I polled a little bit today. It was a little different. It wasn't my name on the ballot, and
after a couple hours, I've just been doing things behind the scene. It really is different. I'm going to miss it greatly.
There's such a changeover in leadership as we move to the next legislature. Senator Looney is going to be the only one there in this leadership position. It was 4 of you before. What are you expecting from your different caucuses?
Go ahead, Joe. You go first.
Thanks, Lynn. See, this is why we got along so great. Well, we're hoping it's more of the same. Matt Ritter and I really worked very closely together. I know Len and his deputies worked closely together. I think what we've done in the state of Connecticut has been really different. We worked in a bipartisan manner. We did the bipartisan budget. We've genuinely respected and liked each other. So hopefully it won't be different. Hopefully that'll continue and it'll set a model that other states should follow.
I agree with Joe. You know, the 6 leaders really got along tremendously. We could say anything we want at a table in negotiations, and no one takes offense to it. We all know what we're trying to do, and we laugh together, joke together, get serious together, have heated arguments, but we never, ever took it personally. And I think that was a unique dynamic of the 6 leaders. I think that next session you're going to have the same. It's a little unsettled what's going to happen in the House. In the Senate, in Republican Senate for leadership. But either one of them that become leader, I think, are going to have that same chemistry. And that's really important. That got us through a lot of very difficult times in the state.
Yeah.
You know, we have a Republican and a Democrat. Senator Fasano and Speaker Simowitz. It's such a nice civil conversation so far. It's only been a couple minutes. But in the era of Trump and Biden, a conversation like this between Republicans and Democrats is refreshing because this type of nice back and forth is a little bit rare right now. Yes, we have local races, but obviously the presidential elections tonight. What effect do you think Donald Trump in the age of Trump and Biden has had or will have on some of these local races tonight? Any correlation or relationship between the presidential election and some of these local elections here?
You know, I think obviously the top of the ticket, Republican or Democrat, to drive out more votes than a non-presidential year. Absolutely. But the tenure and the tone, I don't think it changes at the House or the Senate among the candidates. I think it's civil. We all get along. We have our disagreements on policy, but at the end of the day, they're only policy disagreements and not personal disagreements. We can have discussions. And what we found very quickly, I'll say what we found when we did the bipartisan budget, are we had really deep interest that seemed to align on many, many issues. And I think that's where we have to have conversations. Joe and I both talked about how proud we were of those conversations. And working with a guy like the Speaker, Joe Zimmich, was a real pleasure. Marty Looney and Bob Duff and Themis Claridis, and Vinnie Candeloro, just a real pleasure.
Real quick, what is next for both of you? You know, Senator Fasano, got to ask, there's talk of possibly you taking over JR's position. Is there truth to that?
There's been some talk about it. You know, I'm focusing on the elections right now for this evening and tomorrow, see what we have. So I haven't really thought about anything but my caucus.
Speaker Simowitz?
Yeah, and for me, it really is. I love my community. I genuinely love this state. I am going to find a way to keep busy, probably more with high school kids, not only sports, but doing some with job training and job opportunities. That's my passion, and I think that's where I'll find my future.
For the record, Senator Fasano, that wasn't a no. Senator Len Fasano and House Speaker Joe Simowitz, thank you both for joining us and for serving our state. We appreciate it. All right, stick around. Welcome back. Our coverage of election 2020 continues tonight. Polls closing here in Connecticut in about 13 minutes. Fox 61's Isa Bo standing by at the big board. We are getting some numbers in, not just from Connecticut, but nationally as well. Aisha?
Ben, good evening to you. I want to get right to some of those numbers that are coming in. Earlier, I told you that it looks like President Donald Trump will take Indiana. Well, the Associated Press is calling a couple of other states here. I want to start with Virginia. They are now reporting that Virginia will go to former Vice President Joe Biden. They're also calling West Virginia at this hour. So I want to move that over here to red as well. They're calling that will go to President Donald Trump. And of course, earlier today, we reported that Indiana will go to President Donald Trump. Want to switch over to our U.S. Senate board here as we are waiting for more results to come in. We are starting to see some results from some of those states where the polls closed at 7 and 7:30, including in Georgia, where there are 2 Senate seats that are up for grabs right now. Of course, these are just preliminary results right now. Only 1% of votes counted in that area, as well as another 1% counted in the 2nd Senate race here. Now, we've seen Kentucky move from the blue side to the red side here within the last hour as more of those votes are coming in right now. 23% of the votes have been counted. Mitch McConnell is leading there with 56% right now. And again, some more results coming in from Virginia, where 4% of the votes have been counted, as well as South Carolina. So this is a board that we are watching tonight. Right now, Republicans are leading in the Senate with 53 seats, and Democrats will need 3 seats to flip the Senate right now. So, of course, as more results come in, it will get you to that. So, Connecticut polls, they are expected to close at 8 o'clock. So right now, we are still waiting for some of those numbers to begin to come in. We'll update you as soon as we get them. We're also watching social media, where we're tracking the Associated Press as those results are starting to come in, as well as just making sure that we don't miss any tweets from former President Joe Biden, as well as President Donald Trump. So as more results begin to come in, we will, of course, be sure to update you here on our big board. But for right now, back to you guys.
Aisha, thank you so much. 10 minutes until polls close here in Connecticut. I want to bring back in John Dankosky and get your reaction to the discussion that we just heard before between Speaker Arasimowicz and State Senator Len Fasano. Fasano discussing the possibility of taking over for J.R. Romano. Is this the change that Republicans might need in the state?
Well, and I think you both sort of touched on this. It was nice to have a civil conversation, right, between 2 guys who have worked together for a long time. One's a Republican, one's a Democrat. That's something that Len Fasano seems to get pretty well. And if you look at just the numbers, Jen, in Connecticut, here's the deal. We've got 700,000 new voters who just registered this time. Now, they're not always going to vote in every single election, but that's more people getting involved in politics. 940,000 of the total of 2.3 million registered voters in the state are registered as unaffiliated. Democrats then have a pretty huge advantage over Republicans. Republicans are always going to be playing catch up in this state because of the raw numbers. But that huge number of unaffiliated voters, they don't want to hear an awful lot of what J.R. Romano and the Republican Party has been giving them in Connecticut over the course of the last several years. Republican talking points from the top from Donald Trump don't play very well in Connecticut. There's an awful lot of Connecticut Republicans I talk to who go further than what Rob Kane was saying, that they just don't like the tweets. They just don't like Donald Trump. They don't like that sort of governing. If a Len Fasano or someone like him took the reins of the Connecticut GOP, there's a big chance for them to make gains over the course of the next year and actually run some competitive races at the congressional level, maybe even again at the gubernatorial level. We'll see what happens, but I know that this is not a shoe, and it's just interesting to hear him talking about that, because it might just be what the GOP in the state needs.
Rob Kane, I want to bring you in and talk about some of these early voting numbers that we're seeing nationally for President Trump and for President Biden, and also these absentee ballots. Do you think that the red wave of Trump supporters who didn't vote early, didn't vote absentee, but instead voted today is going to be enough to overtake these high numbers we're seeing? What do you expect? And also, you can obviously respond to John.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of late Republican votes. And what I mean by that is they didn't rely on the absentee ballots or the mail-in ballots. I think as we've stated earlier, Republicans and conservatives, for that matter, want their personal freedoms and want to go to the polling place and vote and be a part of the day and part of the system. So I think you're going to see a lot of those numbers change throughout the day as people go to the polls. As to what John's talking about, I don't disagree with him, certainly. And I do believe that, Len Fasano, first of all, is one of my favorite people in the world. So whatever he does, it would be successful. So I would encourage a run by somebody like that. But it's difficult when you have, a party that is ruled by the more conservative faction. I go back to 2014. John McKinney, who, again, a great guy who probably would have won that election in the general, couldn't get through the primary. So if you look at the potential candidates we have on our side of the aisle for the governor's race in 2022, Themis Claridis and Aaron Stewart, I think they're wonderful candidates and would be great for our party. But then you have, on the other side, maybe a more conservative Bob Stefanowski, who last time got through the primary a little bit easier. So it's a difficult race to run for a Republican in Connecticut.
Treasurer Wooden, want to bring you into this right now, too. Republicans say that Democrats are only running on their hatred of President Donald Trump.
That's absurd. I mean, it is true that there is a great amount of dislike for the president, his policies, and I agree with John that it's more than the tweets, right? It's what he says, it's what he enacts. So that's true. With respect to Biden and Kamala Harris, they have laid out a plan and a vision for this country that meets middle-class and working-class Americans at their kitchen table. And so there is a very positive message. I think early on in the cycle, I would say more people were voting against or just against Trump in terms of those supporting Biden. The more post-convention you heard the message and the vision for America. And Biden has been consistent from when he announced to his closing arguments is fighting for the soul of America and what that means. And you see it in the exit polls today that I think it's like 65% of Biden voters are definitely voting for him and his vision. And so that's not true as articulated.
John Dankosky, in about a minute and a half we have left, would like to talk to you about the Electoral College and the way in which Election Day works. All of these people waiting in lines for could be hours here throughout the state of Connecticut are not voting for the president, but they're voting for Connecticut's electors, all 7 of which typically Connecticut's 7 out of 7 go blue. Where is the enthusiasm for a Trump voter here in Connecticut to go out, wait in line for an hour and a half, and cast their vote, their patriotic duty for President Trump, when really it's not going to, I mean, we like to say every vote counts, but in the state of Connecticut, a vote for Donald Trump doesn't really count toward the Electoral College, which inevitably elects the president.
Well, and I'll just say to the Republicans out there listening, it would be why you might want to run more candidates who can win more statewide races and can have more enthusiasm in the state, a state that doesn't necessarily want a Donald Trump style of governing, whether it's at the state or the local level. Look, I think the other piece of this is the Electoral College. A lot of people say it's broken. A whole bunch of states, including Connecticut, have made a compact, and they've said, we want to band together, and we want to make sure that the person who gets the most votes in America ends up being the president. They haven't pulled together quite enough states into that compact yet, and there's some questions about whether or not it's constitutional. But if that's ever able to happen, we'll actually have a president who is elected by the most voters, which is something that it feels like the right thing to do pretty deep into the 21st century right now.
All right. John Dankosky, thank you so much. And thank you so much to our panel of experts for joining us for the last 2 hours. Important discussions here, important points, and we appreciate your time. Former State Senator, Connecticut Republican Auditor Rob Kane, Treasurer Sean Wooden, and John Dankosky, host of the podcast Steady Habits with the Connecticut Mirror. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Before we go to break here, I want to take a live look in Hartford, where polls are set to close at 8 p.m., and they look pretty closed. That's 4 minutes away. Right now, if you take out your phone and point your camera to the code on your screen, That'll bring you straight to the elections results page of Fox61.com, live updating results all night long.
And hey, go join us on the Fox 61 News app, Facebook Live, or the Fox 61 YouTube channel. We will be live streaming local results and reaction over the next 2 hours. Then join us back on TV for the Fox 61 News at 10 and 11. We'll see you then.